So I'll begin with just a homage to the Buddha as the teacher. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay. So, beginning a day of practice, and this will be whatever we want it to be, yeah? So definitely engineering a lot of space, and you have the flexibility to decide, what do I want to be sitting right now? Do I want to be walking? Do I need to bring energy up? Can I relax? Can I settle? And that'll change. And this path is individual, yeah. So it's not one size fits all, and you can create a retreat environment that tries to give everybody the same supporting conditions, but everybody's going to take advantage of them differently, yeah. So you're encouraged to just make it work. If you need to change your posture, sit a different way. All I ask is that you don't fall asleep right here in the middle of the floor, and that's it. You can fall asleep anywhere in the woods. Yeah. And that comes to so the topic of the day was suggested, and really can't knock it. It's a great one. So it's right effort. Yeah. And right effort is part of the Noble Eightfold Path. And it's really worth looking at, even though I think if you're like me, when you immediately you look at right effort, you feel a little bit of anxiety start to come up. Yeah, a little bit of bile, like effort. Okay, I gotta be trying harder, trying harder, trying harder. I think different cultures, approach the idea differently. And the Buddha was in a culture where people were very relaxed. Yeah, you your life was, you lived a long time if you lived 40 years, and it's like you didn't rush to a meal because it was like pounded grain that you had like there wasn't a lot going on. It wasn't as hectic, yeah. So you could actually talk to people about, knuckling down and striving and working hard, and it would be like, oh wow, I haven't tried that before. Maybe I'll give it a try. But in our society, I think many people hear right effort and they start beating themselves up, yeah, because we already put so much effort into so many things, and um, how could we do more of that? Yeah, how is that going to help us at all? But that's what is really amazing about right effort, is understanding that it's part of the Eightfold Path. You're familiar with the Eightfold Path? I think you probably heard, yeah. But it's also to understand that the Eightfold Path is something different than everything else. Yeah. So it's not simply that we have got to take what we're doing and work harder, but right effort is really pointing at something that's completely perpendicular to everything we normally put all of our energy into. The Eightfold Path, if it was something that we were already doing, and people would be getting enlightened all the time, just randomly. Yeah? They would cook the perfect dish on the stove and they would get enlightened, or they would go hiking in the Alps and they'd look out at the sunrise and they'd get enlightened. But it's just not what happens. Yeah, the Eightfold Path is a completely different framework on thinking and perceiving the world, and so the effort within the Eightfold Path is also completely different from our normal effort. Yeah, and I think that's why it can be daunting at first, is because we are applying so much effort and we're trying to figure out how to add in more effort to apply to our spiritual practice, but to instead to start to turn it around and to look at right effort as the Buddha is talking about it, as descended from how we view the world. And if we change how we view the world and what we pursue, then that will also change what we're applying effort to. And understand we're not adding effort to our daily lives, but we're shifting effort into a completely different way of being. Yeah? So start maybe with what the Buddha has to say about right effort is extremely simple. So I'll talk for maybe a half an hour, but whenever the Buddha talked about right effort, it was maybe 30 seconds, yeah? And it was, in the course of 45 years, it was maybe 30 seconds here, and then a couple months later, 30 seconds here. There aren't pages and pages and books on right effort because it's a very simple premise. Not much more needs to be said. One example is in Majjhima Nikaya 141, and this is the standard formula. And I tried to simplify it because the Buddha says it he uses a lot of synonyms or a lot of different words to try to explain what we're doing so that we don't get caught on one. And I just cut some of that out. So what is right effort? It's when one generates enthusiasm, applies their mind, and strives to prevent the arising of bad, unskillful qualities. Yeah? It's when one generates enthusiasm, applies their mind, and strives so that arisen bad, unskillful qualities are given up. It's when one generates enthusiasm, applies their mind, and strives so that good, wholesome qualities that haven't arisen arise. And it's when one generates enthusiasm, applies their mind, and strives so that good, wholesome qualities that have arisen persist. They continue, they get strengthened, and they are fulfilled. And that's right effort. It's fairly straightforward, but as I said, the first question should be, okay, now how is this totally different than what I'm doing already? So what are we applying our effort to? Well, we want to eat well, yeah? So we go into the supermarket and we're looking down the aisle and like, okay, this has all of these vitamins and this is organic and this is free trade, and we're grabbing one of each for all of these and we're applying effort to try to eat well. And we want to be an upstanding citizen, so we're paying taxes and we're donating to various groups, and we care about equality, so we're writing to senators and doing all these things. Basically, we're going to work and we're working all day. We're putting our energy into cultivating things, and this is not that. This is it's dealing specifically with the mind with which we do all of those different things, yeah? And so this is not about our external activities as much as it is about the intention and the quality of the mind that is approaching activities. So a good example of this is another way that the Buddha frames right effort is in Majjhima Nikaya 117. And the Buddha talks about each part of the Eightfold Path, and then he says, well, what is right effort in regards to that part of the Eightfold Path? For one example, he says, in regards to right view, one makes an effort to abandon wrong view and to enter upon right view. This is one's right effort. Yeah? We recognize we don't have right view. We think about what right view is. We try to abandon the things in the way of right view, and we try to get right view to arise. Yeah? And once it does arise, then we start to protect it. Yeah? And similarly with right intention. One makes an effort to abandon wrong intention and to enter upon right intention. This is one's right effort. Yeah? And so on with right speech, right action, right livelihood, right mindfulness, right concentration. Yeah? Basically, right effort is being applied to every factor of the Eightfold Path. And so when we are putting effort into things, we're not necessarily cultivating the Eightfold Path. But when we're cultivating the Eightfold Path, we are applying effort. Yeah, even just considering and contemplating the Eightfold Path is applying some effort. It's applying the mind to this topic and saying, well, how do I see the world? And is this in accord with the way things are? For me, that's very relaxing, yeah, and it's very energizing to think that all of this, yeah, just how radical it is, and how we need to start seeing ourselves differently to even begin this process. So the Buddha is talking not about people, not about activities, he's talking about thoughts. He's talking about moods. Yeah? He's talking about habits. And he's saying that these are not you. These are not people. Yeah? He's saying you don't have to be a better person. He's saying that when a thought arises, you can understand its quality. You're like, this is an angry thought. You're like, this is worth abandoning, simply because it's causing suffering in my life. And then once we've abandoned it, we say, well, what do I want in its place? Well, a friendly thought is kind of the opposite of that. And we think of friendly thought and we're like, okay, great. I can't be friendly and angry at the same time. Yeah. And we've substituted, and this is what right effort deals with, is we're going to start right from the beginning. You have to get into right view, which means you have to step out of the idea that you are a concrete thing. And you have to say, no, I've got all sorts of different thoughts coming up during the course of the day. Yeah? All sorts of different moods, all sorts of different habits coming up during the course of the day. And I've never really I've never really sat down and taken them piece by piece and said, what are you? Where are you coming from? Do I want you around? Yeah. Simply because before the Eightfold Path, before right view starts to arise, we think this is us. Yeah, I have these problems. I need to be a better person. And sometimes we shift whole parts of our life to try to avoid an unskillful thing that we do. But if we were to take that unskillful thing at face value and say, you are just a thought that arises based on causes and conditions. You're not me. I'm not you. You can cease. You can cease with that remainder. And if it's an unskillful one, then please do. Yeah. And then we apply ourselves, because anybody who's had an addiction or a grudge or just a persistent doubt knows unskillful qualities don't go away on their own. Yeah. Addictions don't go away on their own. You don't just wake up the day after and it's like, I think I'm not addicted to cigarettes. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I'm not addicted to cigarettes anymore. You're right. That was a whole bad adventure, but now we're good. No, it's once we've cultivated a habit, we've put a lot of energy into that habit. We've put a lot of effort, wrong effort, into developing that habit based on the idea that it would make us happy or it would solve our problems. And now, right effort is to kind of bleed all the energy that out of that. We've already put a lot of wrong effort into developing that habit. So we have to use not necessarily the same amount of effort, because even a pattern that we have cultivated for decades can crumble under a couple of days or weeks of, actually trying to deal with it. Yeah. And why is that? Well, wrong effort is based on habit, on reflex. We've put in a pattern and we let the pattern run. It's an automatic part of our mind. So there's no intention there. The intention was at the beginning of the habit. We're like, oh, I want that. And we start to cultivate it. But from then on, it's just running on its own. We're not doing it. When we start to turn things around and start to actually do something, intentionally look at that and intentionally try to deal with it, these are weighted, yeah? Intention is very powerful. Being unintentional is not that powerful. Yeah? So it doesn't take nearly as long to unravel a pattern as it does for that pattern to get really established. We can do this fairly quickly, but that's not to say that's instantaneous. We do have to balance out the effort, and that's what the striving in right effort is talking about. We can't just expect, based on a wish, oh, may I not get angry when that person slams their car door every day. um, that wish will not come to be. Yeah, because we can't balance being unintentional in one part of our life with another unintentional, wishy-washy, may this be so. Instead, we've got to apply ourselves. We've got to actually do something. Yeah. So saying, okay, I don't want to get angry when they slam the door. Yeah. I'm going to try not to get angry when they slam the door. Yeah. We know that. So that is this first one. Yeah. We have a habit that comes up, and we're like, okay, I'm going to try not to go with this. We have an arisen unskillful quality, and we're resisting it. Like, I'm not going to act on this. I'm not going to make more of this. I don't want this to stick around. And then, so we get out of it, we calm down, we begin to look at, well, where did it come up? Why did it come up? What triggered it to come up? And that's when we can start to say, um, what can I do about this? And as I said before, if we're taking the worldly paradigm, we might avoid, where that we might avoid the time and place where that person slams a car door. But then, can you set up your whole life so that you're never around anything that triggers you? You can try, but you will fail, because the trigger is really not outside. The trigger is that we're primed to be angry. We've got the roots of anger within us, and that's what needs to be dealt with. And so we can say, well, rather than running away from all car doors that might be slammed, I'm going to sit here, I'm going to watch, and I'm going to listen to what's the mental dialogue saying. They always do this. Oh, they're so inconsiderate. Oh, how dare they? Yeah, don't they know what time it is? And then we listen to that and we say, well, okay, that's the mental dialogue. That's the mood of the mind that leads to anger. Yeah. And if I were to deal with that, would I prevent the anger from arising? And so we start to deal with the things that set up the anger. Right. And if we do this successfully, we will find that, yes, the anger does not arise. And this is something that longtime practitioners can agree to. It's like, I am different than I used to be. I am harder to anger. I stay angry for less time. Or in terms of greed, like I'm less obsessed with the things that I see. I'm more able to practice contentment. I'm more able to relax and be happy with my simple things. Yeah. Or it's like in terms of delusion, you'd be like, yeah, no, it's like I meditate more. Like, I'm aware of my thoughts more. I'm more peaceful. When we first start out, this is not, it just doesn't compute. Like, we've seen it on the cover of a magazine, somebody being happy and sitting and being all blissed out in meditation, but we don't believe that we can do that. And it's true. Like, the us that sees that magazine and says, oh, I'd really like to be a meditator, I'd really like to be spiritual, cannot do it. Because at that moment, with that particular collection of habits and thoughts and moods, we can't. But the beautiful thing is that collection of habits and moods is impermanent, arising and ceasing all the time. So we're not going to be that particular collection of habits and moods forever. And as we start to walk the path, little by little, we start to apply. We listen to a Dhamma talk, we read a Dhamma book, we just sit and think about the Four Noble Truths, and we're applying effort to right view. We start to look at our intention for doing things, and we're like, oh, I'm doing that out of spite. That's not useful. I'm gonna ease off on that. And it's like, oh wow, look how obsessed I am with that thing. I'm just gonna leave that thing alone. This is an intention that's just gonna keep compounding. And gradually, applying effort to one part of the Eightfold Path, applying it to the other, to the next, to the next, we start shifting the whole composition of our mind. And then one day we're sitting there and we're taking a mental inventory, and we're like, yeah, I don't know when it happened, but anger fell away. I'm not persistently angry anymore. I don't know when it happened, but I'm kind of relaxed right now. I used to not be able to sit still for 5 seconds. I don't know. I don't know what happened, but I didn't check my phone for like 2 hours. I guess I just forgot. But that used to never happen. I used to never be able to forget to check my phone. Yeah, it was really nice. And what happened is we've become a different person, because there never was one static person to begin with. So I thought this is something that's just, it does take some relaxing around the idea of effort. Yeah, we don't start with, okay, what do I want? How am I going to get it? Yeah, we will make practice traumatizing if we do that. Yeah, and I think many people are traumatized by the idea of practice because they sit down and start applying the same mind frame that they have in everything else that they do to meditation. And instead, I think it could be really useful. We've got this day, and we've got this very relaxing day, this perfect set of circumstances, a schedule, calm, relaxing people, a nice wooded environment, to just sort of dropping these ideas into the mind and giving ourselves some time to really assess. Yeah, probably we're not going to be very triggered in this environment, so we'll kind of get a perspective on our mind right now. Like, unless you live in Jim's living room, which only Satine can really attest to, only the cat can really say that she lives here, then this is not your normal set of conditions, not your normal set of circumstances. So you don't exist really in the way that you usually exist when you're back in your house with your set of circumstances. That person doesn't exist right now. So you get a bit of opportunity to look and be like, when I go back there, what's going to come up? And how do I feel about that? Yeah. And it doesn't have to be neurotic, sort of like schizophrenic kind of thing. Like there's going to be multiple me's when I get back. And part of me is going to be saying that this other part of me is the cause of all my suffering. But in the morning we can really look at the first two and parts of right effort, and in the afternoon maybe the second two. So this morning, as things usually do, they start with suffering, right? I gotta be a monk, right? But the reason it starts with suffering is because that's our motivation for practicing. We would not be here if we did not experience suffering. If our life was pretty okay already, we would not have picked up meditation, because we would not have wanted to be more peaceful, right? So rather than taking and doing like a huge mental inventory, I think it could be really useful to not even jump to it, but give ourselves some time to think of maybe one pattern or habit or mood that we know that arises in our life. And we know that this is something that is unskillful because it generates suffering in our life. And suffering, remember, is not abject pain as much as it is a sense of discomfort, dissatisfaction, annoyance, frustration, malaise, being bummed out, being restless, being lazy, yeah, some sort of pattern where that comes up, and we know when we visited the refrigerator like 5 times in 1 hour that we're depressed. It's just that simple, yeah. But most of the time we're like, oh, I can't believe I'm in this situation. And instead, what we're doing today is we're saying, well, okay, let's look at that. And let's the first noble truth is, okay, yeah, that is uncomfortable. And it's the thing is, we're not saying I'm a bad person or I always get depressed. We're saying, look, there's certain circumstances where a little bit of depression comes up, and I try to fix it by going into the refrigerator. And it's pretty much everybody on the planet gets in that mood from time to time. So this is not it's not a big deal, but we can look at it and we can say, okay, there is a source of suffering in my life. Yeah. And just it's not going to come immediately. That's we generate enthusiasm. We apply our mind. Let's just think about it. Think about what that's like, and I think it can be really useful to take one thing, just one thing, as a welcome. Taking just one thing that generates suffering in our lives and try to compartmentalize it. Because again, that's what right effort is about. We want to see this habit by itself. Yeah? We want to see it as not part of us, but as something that arises based on causes and conditions. So in some way, we're gonna put it in brackets. And we're going to say, okay, I am not a depressed person. Depression arises in this way at this time. And it might not even be, we might not even be talking about every time depression arises. Just that one thing that gets me to go to the refrigerator for ice cream. Yeah, and just put it in a little compartment and say, okay, when does that come up? When does that come up? And just keep. This is the way I do all my contemplation. It's just you apply the mind to it. You think, so when does that come up? And then give your mind a little time to kind of make the connections. Yeah, and then before you drift off onto a cloud, thinking, listening to the bluebirds, then you come back. Yeah, and you're like, when? What is it? When does my mind do that? Yeah, when does that thought come up? And as you start to circle around it, you'll probably find that it does become more objective. Like that one pattern, it becomes just, it becomes extracted from your life. And you're like, okay, yeah, no, it really only comes up in certain times. It's not always there. And that gives us a sense of how to start contemplating, yeah. And yeah, as with any addiction or any diet, yeah, if we try to take it all on at once, like cold turkey, it's like, okay, I'm never going to do that. That's fine. Yeah, that is the first that is the first right effort. Yeah, to say, okay, I'm going to strive to not do this. But we also give ourselves the room to say, well, it's obviously not going to work the first time. Yeah, I'm gonna say I'm never gonna go back to the refrigerator. I'm never gonna have another cigarette. I'm never gonna lash out at that person. And as soon as we do it, we're like, there, I went again. It's not gonna work the first time because we've already put so much energy into the unintentional habit. Otherwise, it would not be creating suffering in our life. But this is how it begins. Yeah. So how can we create a realistic scenario where I am going to build up momentum to resist this, build up momentum to not let this arise? Um, and there isn't just one answer, yeah. And there's like I've talked to people who have like actual drug addictions, yeah, and sometimes I've sat and I've been on the phone with them and just talked to them for like hours, simply because talking with them keeps them from going out and getting the drugs. Yeah, sometimes some of the things we will put in the way will be just physical obstructions. Yeah, if we keep going to the refrigerator, that we turn the refrigerator 90 degrees so you can't open the door. And we're like, okay, fine, now what you gonna do? Yeah, and now we have to get to the refrigerator. We have to do two things. It's going to be a lot less mindless. Yeah, but some things might be. It's like, okay, I always do this at this particular time of the evening. Yeah, and so we set a little reminder that says, okay, it's 5 o'clock. You always turn on that TV show and binge. It's like you get a little reminder at 4:55 that says, go for a walk. Get out of the house. And the first time it won't work. The second time it won't work. You'll see it coming. You'll be like, oh yes, what's that? My phone's buzzing, but I don't know what. And it's 5 o'clock. Oh, I feel like settling in. Yeah, but can we create a realistic regimen? Yeah, where we start to little by little get that energy. Yeah, and if you've all been meditating for quite some time, and if this is the case, then something has worked. Yeah? You've been able to do this with something. And if at any time in contemplating this one unskillful habit, you think, I'm never going to be able to beat this. I've been addicted to this. I've been doing this. I've been saying stuff like this my whole life. It's not true. You weren't born doing that. You weren't born saying that. And you can pause for a second and you can be like, well, what is something I actually have overcome? Something I actually have let go of. And this is how we generate faith, is by looking at the places where we've developed confidence and self-assurance in the practice. So if ever we get discouraged, to take a moment and say, okay, yeah, what have I gotten over? How have I improved? How have I overcome things? And then like, okay, yeah, this works. This is possible. And then go back and take a look at our little thing. And as I said, we this morning, no matter how much we think about this particular unskillful habit that is generating suffering, we're not going to overcome it this morning. Yeah. No matter how much we furrow our brow and think and think and think, I will not do this, I will not do this, I will not do this, we are we won't even begin until we get ourselves in that situation. Yeah. That's when the real work will be done. Instead, we're just going to be thinking about all of our options. Yeah. And sort of developing that first part. It's the word the Buddha uses is chanda, which is a great word. It means interest, it means enthusiasm, it means zeal. Um, but at the most basic level, chanda is the opposite, the wholesome opposite of craving. When we are interested in something, we are willing to apply ourselves and put energy towards it, not because we have to, but because we want to. And it's because yeah, no, I'm interested in that. I'd like to do that. This seems doable. This seems possible. So building up that reservoir of, I'd really like to do something about it. And it's funny that starts with reflecting on how this thing is causing suffering. Yeah. The two go hand in hand. The more we think about, yeah, this is really annoying, and yeah, this has been around for quite a while, and yeah, I haven't really diligently thought about how to deal with it. Well, now we are. Now we are creating that enthusiasm, and this is how it all starts. Okay, so that's what we can do this morning. And again, we'll be doing the half hour. So the bell will go every half hour. If you're in here, you can decide if you want to change posture, sitting, standing, walking, going off somewhere other than the living room and lying down. um, and if you're out walking, setting a timer and noting the time, so you could try to come back on the half hour, or just decide if you want to come back on the half hour, and then we'll go for 2 hours. Yeah, and we'll have a chance to see how it is and what we came up with, or you can keep it to yourself. But it's totally harmless, right? You don't have to make any lifelong determinations today. You don't have to set any New Year's resolutions that you know are not going to last, but rather just wrap your mind around a pattern. Yeah, wrap your mind around a source of suffering and start to ask the question of, well, what could be done about this? Yeah. Okay.